want to say some words in gratitude, acknowledgement, and celebration of Ram Dass. I first heard about Ram Dass when I was little. Both my parents had gone to workshops of his, and I didn't know much about him, but his name was in my mind early on. My parents looked up to him. And then later on, I found out about his book, Be Here Now, which totally blew my mind because it was, frankly, because it was such a, piece of art, right? Like, anyone that's seen that book, it's not just the text that matters, it's the fact that it's such a work of art, and there's so much devotion to making those words, so beautiful visually. I really appreciated that. I really liked square books. Like, how many square books have you seen in your life? It's a very special book. So, but it was from a distance. I knew about Ram Dass from a distance. I knew about his books from a distance. I got Grist for the Mill was given to me maybe for my 16th birthday or something. I remember asking for books for my birthday, for people to give me their favorite books, and somebody gave me that book. Probably my mom, actually. I'm not totally sure. I remember. And Grist for the Mill is a small book, not his most popular book, but that phrase then became, it's like it reminded all of us of that concept. I read the book, and so then my family, that became a phrase that we used also, grist for the mill. This is grist for the mill. In other words, whatever struggle or hardship we're going through, it's grist for the mill, right? It's just something that we're putting through the mill to make things work even more smoothly. It's helping us learn who we are. It's helping us learn how to move through the world. It's helping us transform. It's helping us get free. When I started teaching high school, I really thought I knew how to meditate already. I frankly don't know why I thought that. I don't remember what experience I had that made me think that. I mean, I had done a lot of meditative things, but I don't think I had any sitting meditation practice at that point. But I felt like I knew how to meditate, and I think it's because my parents paid attention to Ram Dass. And whatever his influence was just kind of percolated sweetly in that way. And then I met my mentor in that period of my life, in that decade of my life really. This one meditation teacher became a mentor of mine. And he visited Ram Dass in Hawaii. And I remember being absolutely floored. Like, wait, you can do that? You can know this man in person? I had no idea. And it was a cool thing because at that moment in time, Ram Dass was still my parents' teacher. And so for him to come into my present reality was kind of mind-blowing. But I got really excited about it. And at that same moment in time, there was a conflagration of a few things. One was that I was meditating a lot at that time. The second was that I was planning a trip to visit one of my best friends in Amsterdam and anticipating the possibility of doing some drugs because I was at the time less comfortable with doing illegal things and felt okay, but if I'm in Amsterdam, then I can do it. And we had talked about it, and so I was thinking maybe we'll do some mushrooms or something. But I was conflicted about it. And the hummingbirds are with us, making noise. They're getting ready to fight. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful, that red breast. So I was conflicted about it, and I must have brought it up with my meditation teacher before he was going to see Ram Dass, and I either asked or he offered to ask Ram Dass what Ram Dass thought of me doing drugs in Amsterdam. And so my teacher then went to Hawaii and spoke to Ram Dass, apparently while they were swimming in the ocean, which we'll come back to. So, and he said to Ram Dass, Ram Dass, what do you think? He told Ram Dass, I have this student, this is what she's doing. She's got a very deep practice. She's got a really solid connection with God. She's thinking about doing some drugs like this. And Ram Dass, who, if you don't know, Ram Dass began his career at Harvard as a professor researching LSD. He was a psychology professor, and he and Timothy Leary got into these, at the time, very organic legal studies into the transformational psychological powers of LSD. And that was the beginning of his awakening. He later went to India, found his guru, became Ram Dass, changed his name from Richard Alpert. But for him, in any of the stories that you tell in any of the stories that he tells, any of his books, you will hear him reference that. That was always the beginning of his story, that awakening. So that was part of my interest in knowing from Ram Dass, like, is this a good idea for me? Will this take me deeper? So in my imagination always, my teacher Harshita and Ram Dass are floating there, surrounded by roses in some beautiful Hawaiian ocean. And Harshita's told him this story, and Ram Dass says to Harshita, she doesn't need it. So Harshita, my teacher, comes back to me, tells me this story, and I just felt this immense relief. It was like, as far as I could tell, the most spiritually advanced person that I'd ever known or heard of had given me permission to accept myself as I was. And more than that, like, almost I felt he was saying, like, yeah, she did, like, I needed that. I needed drugs to wake up, but she doesn't. She's already ahead of that, you know? So I kind of felt like I got the A. I felt like I got his blessing. And so I didn't do drugs. And I actually stopped doing drugs or drinking alcohol or taking in really any substances at all, including meat, from that point forward. Not as a renunciation, but as a relief. It was like, it gave me permission to drop convention. At the time, I was a teacher. My colleagues and I would go to happy hour almost every Friday, if not every day. Alcohol was a huge part of our lifestyle. All my friends were talking about psychedelics. It was like, to be able to just let go of all of that, for me, was such a huge relief. And again, I felt like I had been touched by God. I felt like grace had come in and just wrapped me up in its arms, in his arms. And I felt so blown away that this super famous, important man, Ram Dass, had given me, tiny little Jesse Johnson, even a moment of his attention. And then I found out, over the next few years, I found out that Ram Dass led a retreat every year in Hawaii. And I was like, oh yeah. And my mom and I decided to go together, which was far out also, because even though my mom studied with Ram Dass before I was born, she was not really all that into like spiritual stuff or retreats. So it was a big deal for her to say yes to this, spend the money to go to Hawaii. It was a pretty expensive retreat. Expensive resort, but we went. This was 4 or 5 years ago, and we got to be with Ram Dass in person every day for like 5 days, and I just felt like I was home. And all the trappings of that community were not for me. Like, it's not, the community that follows Ram Dass has not really ever been my community. But Ram Dass himself, I don't think there's any better example of pure love in the whole world. He was so generous, he was so wise, he was so powerful, he was so honest, he was so humble. And his way with words and his willingness to sort of make a fool of himself or use his own human foolishness to teach the rest of us was such a huge example for me. And at the end of that retreat, which, by the way, thousands of people at this point have been on the same retreat with him, and it's very similar every time, so I know that there's thousands of people that have had this experience. At the end of that retreat, every participant, there's a couple hundred every time, I think, gets to go and sit in front, right in front of Ram Dass. And the year that I went with my mom, he was already in a wheelchair. He'd had his stroke. He was not able to speak very much. And frankly, I think he was probably at that point, I might be imagining this, but I have the idea that he was relieved to not have to speak, to just be able to love. So mostly he was just loving on this retreat. And I waited in the line. Line took hours, right, for people to come and sit or kneel or hug him. And I got up there and we just looked into each other's eyes for what felt like an hour. I'm sure it was like 10 seconds, but it was like a big moment for me. And I just felt like I didn't need to do or be anything more than who I was. I knew that he would accept me. I knew that he would love me. I knew it. I think that might have been the first time that I ever felt that way, like meeting someone for the first time. So I sat on the floor at his feet and just looked him in the eye, and he went, and I felt once again like, this soul sees my soul. It was great. It was great. It was one of the highlight moments of my life. And then we ended the retreat and we all got to swim with him. Again, like surrounded by flowers, hundreds of us in the water. And he was in the water just crying out, "Oh joy, oh joy, oh joy," over and over and over again. That was the only word. Joy, like a mantra. It was spectacular. I feel so honored and grateful to have known him even for those few moments in this lifetime, and to, more than that, I think that my whole life, my whole spiritual life is because of him, because he's so much of the reason that these teachings came to the West. He brought them from India here, these teachings of love and devotion. He lived them here. He talked about them here, but he lived them here. And there's so many people that were touched by his life, so many people who were touched by his teachings. So, December 22nd, he left his body, and as with all our spiritual teachers, when they leave their bodies, the opportunity is to connect with them even deeper. Because we're not really connecting on the physical level anyway. We're actually connecting on the soul level. And this is something that Ram Dass talked about almost from the beginning, because his spiritual teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, passed very early on. Like, Ram Dass met him, they spent a couple years, I think, they knew each other, and then his teacher passed away, and Ram Dass just became more and more and more in love with his teacher as the years went. There must have been at least like 50 years of Ram Dass being alive after Neem Karoli Baba died, where his devotion just grew and grew. And so I feel that right now as we're, together here, that Ram Dass's presence, his teaching, his truth is more powerful, not less. More present, not less. More alive, not less. And whether you knew him or not, doesn't matter. One of the things that happened when I sat at his feet was that he basically introduced me to Neem Karoli Baba. There was like Ram Dass in his wheelchair, and then next to him was this beautiful portrait, a photograph of Neem Karoli Baba. And without having to say anything, Ram Dass was basically like, "Here's my guru. Like, now he's yours too." And so if you feel that connection with Ram Dass, just know that it's available. You didn't miss the opportunity. He's right here, right now. In soul, in text, in his books, in his movies. So grateful, forever grateful. He would love this, you know? He is loving this. This sunset view. Oh joy. Oh joy. Oh joy. Thank you, Ram Dass.